Good evening all, and welcome. You may be wondering why birthday stories. Is it my birthday? No, it's not. But on the 23rd of May is the birthday of my very good friend Killer Orange Cat. And I have a huge favour to ask each and every one of you. If you could please go over to his channel, to his latest video, and wish him a happy birthday. I think it would be an awesome gift for him to receive so many birthday wishes when he wakes up tomorrow. I'll leave the link to his channel and his latest video in the description. And if you're not subscribed to him or hadn't heard of him before, he's an amazing storyteller and always has incredibly chilling stories and is definitely worth your subscription. Okay, but back to what I was saying. I need to let you know that this month I'm hosting a mega giveaway, so listen up to hear how it works. There are only 4 surprise mystery boxes left, and a new one becomes available every 3 days. In order to enter, all you need to do is press the little bell icon, hit the like, make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment. However, there is a catch. You have to have left the like and the comment on each video that came out in those 3 days in order for your entries to qualify. Today will be the first day for your chance to win the 7th box, so be sure to tune in tomorrow and the next day to get your entries in. There's also going to be a handful of consolation prizes for those of you who commented on every video in May. The winner of the 6th box has also been selected, so listen up to the end for the reveal. Is it you? Best of luck everyone, but for now it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This is a story of my 2 most memorable birthday surprises. Let me start out by saying that these events happened on my 5th birthday, with mostly my cousins, and also people who I didn't know at the time, to celebrate. Dad had invited 1,000,001 of his friends, all of them somehow knowing me and my twin. After they'd all gotten drunk karaokeing in the dining room and eating their beer bellies full, my mum thought it would be a good time to light the candles. We all gathered in our living room, about 20 people, hovering over my twin and I, and the rest sitting on the couch or still drinking in the dining room. I also should include that my dad is a domestic abuser, alcoholic, and had used verbal abuse towards my mum too many times to count during my childhood. The traditional happy birthday song began, and just as my sister and I went to blow out the candles, one of my impatient cousins decided we couldn't do it on our own. So she blew out all the candles. My sister and I looked at her, and that's when it started. "Your stupid girl blew out the candles," a voice said in Vietnamese, directed towards the father of her. "What did you say?" My dad, who was the brother of the wish thief's father, yelled at the person. "Don't talk to him like that!" And a punch flew towards the person. After that, I only remember getting hurried into my room that I shared with my 3 other sisters, and my cousins were crammed through the window that my mum opened. And then she rushed back to where the fight was to try and get to the phone in order to call the police, which was inconveniently located in the living room with them. I ran towards the open front door, wanting to be with my mum, and saw my dad ripping the wall phone from her and throwing it at the floor. Only 2 of the men there, out of the roughly 30 he invited, helped my mum. Just as my dad was about to hit her, The fight circulated outside as all the children got in the spare cars and the mothers drove to my cousin's house only 15 minutes away. We got into the house, locked the doors, and checked if everything was alright, and separated my 6 sisters and I to try to sleep the event off for the time being. Almost everyone slept together on the floor of their living room with their mums when my cousin's mum came in and said that my older cousin, Mike, who was about 15, had decided he would be able to share his bed with one other person. My mum volunteered my twin, who had a mental handicap and might be better off in bed. That's when he walked out awkwardly, and even though I could tell something was wrong with him, the whole room suddenly stopped for a second, seeming like everyone got the same vibe. One of my older sisters, Tessa, stood up and said she would volunteer. I looked at her and saw that she looked unsure and cautious, even seeming scared. I don't know what got into me, but apparently I suddenly stood up and ran over towards Mike and stood next to him, looking excited to be sleeping with my older cousin. I must have been an expert liar as a kid, because I still get shivers around him to this day. We went into his room, closed the door, and turned off the light. I slept facing the wall, while he put his arm around me as a blanket just to my nose height. He was basically spooning me. Being the innocent kid I was, I thought this was just normal. And then I felt a hand. I knew it was an ordinary place, but it was my stomach. But then he pulled me closer, and then stuck his hand in a place I knew was not right. My eyes opened from my half-sleep, and I stared at the wall, trying to comprehend, with all the intelligence a 5-year-old could have, what the hell he was doing. I tried to scoop away from him, and by a stroke of luck, but very bad luck for everyone not in the room, I heard my dad kick open the front door and the screams of the people in the living room and kitchen. I jumped up and so did Mike, quickly jumping off the bed and opening the door. I saw my dad wielding a gun and pointing it towards my mum, who was on her knees with her head down, begging for forgiveness in Vietnamese and crying. Mike's mum saw me and grabbed me to huddle with the rest of the kids on the couch, which didn't make any sense because he actually had a clear shot of our heads. My boss of a grandma bravely went to the wall phone, which was right behind my mum and adjacent to the front door, and dialed 911. A few more moments of my dick of a dad yelling and threatening to shoot everyone later, the police arrived and arrested him by force. You'd think that my mum would divorce him and let him rot in prison after that. Right? Wrong. My mum actually bailed him out, dropped charges, and let him live back with us. Currently, I'm 15 and he's still here. Mike is still here too. He's now married and has a son, and he acts as if nothing happened. My dad is seemingly nicer, but still verbally abuses everyone who lives under his roof. It was by far the worst birthday that I have ever had. Last January, I celebrated my birthday. It didn't go too well. I was playing some computer games alone in my apartment. That would mean I'd stay up late at night gaming. I was so bored that time, because my friends were out of town. And then it was midnight. I was like, hooray, happy birthday to me. So I ate pizza and drank some juice. All that delicious introvert stuff. And then the phone rang. I thought it would be my friends calling to greet me because it's my birthday. But who calls late at night? I hesitated, but still I answered it. I heard a girl and a man speaking, and I didn't recognize the voice. I asked them who they were, and told them that they may have been calling the wrong person. It sounded like the girl took the phone away from the man and answered me. She told me that they knew me and that they were looking at me right now through the window. The girl sounded very drunk because she was giggling. I was like, what the hell? I don't remember giving any strangers my number, but anyway. I hung up and continued playing some computer games. And after a few minutes the phone rang again. So I answered and told them to stop messing with me. And after that, I stood up from my desk and went to look at the window. I didn't see anyone. I tried to look carefully, and I even used my cell phone to zoom in on some other buildings, but I found none. I started to believe it was a prank call, and then it rang again. I picked the phone up, but I didn't speak. On the other line, they weren't speaking either. It was like they were waiting for me to go first. So I started to ask them what was their problem. The girl then told me that they were outside my apartment, waiting for me to open the door. Now I was scared shitless, because I didn't know who they are or what they wanted. I ran to my door, unlocked it, and went to my kitchen and grabbed a knife. And then I heard a knock at the door. I jumped from my seat and went straight to my bedroom and locked it, leaving my computer open and the living room lights on. It was the worst birthday ever. This happened to me when I was a young boy. I am now in my late 50s, and I haven't thought about being 10 years old in a long time. I remember it being around my 10th birthday, when everything changed in my life forever for my family. I remember it being the best birthday yet, because my mum had secretly saved up enough money to buy me my very own bicycle, and I was more than thrilled. No more borrowing my older brother's when he let me, or standing on the back, or sitting on the handlebars of a friend's bike. No. We were by no means well off. When I was young, we didn't have much, so getting that bike had meant a lot to me. My father was a man who worked a lot, and drank even more than he worked. I'm pretty sure he was drunk more than he was ever sober, and because of that, he was hardly ever around. That was okay with me, my siblings, and my mother, for the most part. Things were actually nice and peaceful when he wasn't home, and the nights he did actually come home, we knew right away to steer clear of him, to be quiet, and to leave him alone. We lived outside of a small town, down a long dirt road, with not very many neighbours nearby. The closest one was a good mile down from us, a really big farmhouse, with lots of fields around them. I remember being friends with their kids, as they were around the same age as us, and we went to school together. Their mum was very sweet, and always offered us something to eat or drink whenever we would stop down there. And their dad, well, he was the complete opposite of our father. I'd never seen him drink, yell, or slap them or their mum about. We knew that not every family was like ours, and that some fathers out there actually seemed to care for them. Like I said, I remember it being around my 10th birthday, because my mom had baked a big cake for myself, my brother, and my 2 younger sisters to share, and of course she had some too. She took me out back, where she had been hiding the bike from me, in one of the sheds, and I remember screaming with excitement, hugging and kissing her, and telling her I loved her, and that she was the greatest mother ever. I hopped on it right away, and took off down the road to test it out. It was the greatest feeling ever in that moment. When something so great happens, you kind of forget the regular hell of a life you seem to live one day to another. It's hard to explain, I suppose. Things were good for the next couple of days. My father had not been home for almost a week. Sometimes, he would just stop in for a few moments here or there. I guess just to make sure that my mum hadn't left him or anything. When I was that age, I hardly recall, at any point in time, when he was home for more than 1 or 2 nights in a week, and never 2 nights in a row. We, the kids, never knew what he was doing, nor did we really want to know. We just knew it was better at home when he wasn't there. I remember riding my bike down the dirt road on my way home from running into town to pick up something at the grocery store for my mum, when my dad's pickup truck passed me and kept heading on down towards home. It made me want to not even go back home, but really, what else could I do? The sun was just starting to go down, and normally, if he did come home, it was right after work or very late at night, after he left who knows where. So it was kind of odd that he was on his way home at this time of day. By the time I pulled up into the yard, I could already hear the yelling. I could hear my mum's voice trying to reason with him for something or other. And then I would hear my dad's voice just overpower hers. I heard something smash, and I didn't want to go inside. I could hear my little sisters crying, and then I heard my mum crying too. My older brother just happened to be down at the neighbour's place that had the farmhouse. I really didn't want to go inside, but I heard another smash, and decided to go in because I couldn't leave my mum and sisters in there alone with him. I peeked in the window of the door before I actually walked in, and saw the house getting destroyed right in front of my family by my crazy drunk father. I tried opening the door slightly and getting my sister's attention to come out, but my dad went from focusing on them to me. I blocked out a lot of it, but from what I can remember, he turned and went straight for me and picked me up by the shoulders and started screaming in my face. My mum was behind him, begging him to put me down, but he just turned and gave her another slap in the face, and she backed down. From what I could tell that was coming out of him, he was livid when he saw me riding down the road on a bike that he knew wasn't my brother's. When he got home, he confronted my mum on where it came from and how I was on it. He managed to get the information out of her that she had been secretly stashing away money to save up for it to get the bike for me, and my dad lost it when she told him that. I'm sure he was probably on a 5 or 6 day heavy drinking binge at this point. I remember the smell of his breath was like sour whiskey pouring into my nostrils as he screamed at me. He was sure that my mother was hiding other things from him, and he was going to find out what. That is why he started tearing up the house. In the 5 minutes it took him from passing me on the road until I got there, he had done quite a bit. All the furniture was thrown around. Lamps and pictures had been smashed. He threw me against one of the walls as I looked up from the floor. He had stormed into the kitchen and smashed what was left of my birthday cake against the back door. Both my sisters were huddled in the corner of the kitchen holding each other, while my mum cried and had blood running down her face. That was it from me. This was the worst I had ever seen my father, and I was scared. I ran out of the house, hopped on my bike, and started heading towards the neighbours. We didn't have a telephone at the home at the time, but I knew that they did, and I was going to call the police in town and stop him. I hardly got out the driveway when I heard the front door open and my father yelling at me to get my ass back in there. I just kept on pedaling, thinking I needed to get to the neighbours and everything would be better. That's when I heard his truck start up and I looked behind me, and he was backing out of the driveway and started heading towards me. I could see the neighbour's house in the distance and just kept on pedaling until I started to see the headlights getting closer and closer. I looked behind me, and he was so close that I knew he was going to hit me. I remember just jumping off the bike towards the side of the road and tumbling down into the side of a field. I shot up and started running across the field towards the neighbours, hearing my dad yelling, but not really caring. When I looked behind me, I saw that my father had already turned around and was heading back towards our house. I got to the neighbours a few minutes later, pounded on the door, and the mum opened up and took a step back because at this point I was sobbing and definitely did not look like my normal self. She took me inside and called her husband to get in there. I was in the middle of telling them what happened when my brother and his friend walked in from playing out back, and in about 2 seconds he was at the door heading towards home. The mum called the police in town and they said that they would send someone right away. But about 10 minutes later, no police had shown up, and I begged the husband to please drive me down to my house. I didn't know what was happening, and I was scared. He agreed since he knew my little sisters and my mum were there, and about halfway down the road, he passed my bike. It was completely mangled up. My dad had run it over with his truck, and I started crying again, partly because I loved the bike, and mostly because I could have still been on it when he did that. We get to the house and my father's truck is gone. Apparently my brother ran all the way home, picked up a baseball bat that was on the side of the house, and with no hesitation walked into the living room and smashed my dad's kneecaps in. As he laid there screaming, my brother grabbed my sisters and mother and ran into one of the bedrooms. He managed to crawl out to his truck and drive away though. The cops showed up just a few minutes after the neighbour and I arrived and took a look at everything that had happened. They found my father about an hour later, one town over at the local tavern. They said it wasn't very hard to find him, since he was well known for being a drunk in the area, and the bars were the first place they went to look for him. They arrested him pretty much on the spot. That night, after the police found my father, the neighbours invited us to stay with them for however long we needed to. My mum was embarrassed, but so very thankful for their help. We only stayed a couple of days, enough time for my mother to make arrangements and to leave that town and go live with my aunt, her sister, a couple of 100 miles away for some short time. I never did see my father again after that, and I have never really minded that. I knew he wasn't in jail too long, because shortly after we got settled into my aunt's house is when the phone calls and letters started. But my mum never caved and went back. Who would? After a year or so, he gave up and agreed to a divorce. I never really paid much attention to that, as I was still young and was living a different life back then than I had before. We stayed with my aunt for a few years, until my mum saved up enough money after getting a job to get our own place. At that point, my brother was 16 or 17, so he was also bringing money in from his job, as well as myself with a newspaper route. I even saved up enough money to get myself another bike. Life was way better than it had ever been. It all started in my last year of high school. I had gotten really into the hardcore scene from my city and attended a bunch of small gigs with my best friend. One day, I receive a Facebook request from a guy named Alan. Looking at his profile and the stuff he posted, I noticed he was 3 years older than me, from the same city, and liked many of the same bands that I did. So, naive 17-year-old me hit accept. We soon started talking, mostly about bands and school. He was in the middle of getting his college degree, and I was just about to choose mine. From time to time, he would tell me how pretty I was, and ask if I had a boyfriend. I did find him attractive too, so I flirted back. However, I quickly lost interest, since a few minutes after flirting, he told me he actually had a girlfriend, but that they were having some trouble. I didn't want to take part in any cheating of any kind, so I told him he should think what was best for him and his girlfriend and do the right thing. From then on, I limited my chats with him to music and school, and he then stopped flirting with me. Anyway, a month or so passed without texting, when suddenly I get a message from him. We talked like we used to, and I had to say bye, and he told me that he'd broken up with his girlfriend and felt so much better. He thanked me for always listening to him without judging, and said that my advice had really helped him. I felt happy for him. I honestly didn't know if this girl was really mean or not, but he seemed happy to be out of the relationship, and I just wanted to be a good friend, so I was happy for him as well. Now at this point, I don't know what came to me. Maybe it was because I did find him attractive, or because it was very late, and I wasn't making the best decisions. But I told him my best friend's birthday was in a few days, and that he should come to the party too. He agreed in a second, and I told him to meet at the station closest to her house. So I finally got to meet him at the station, almost after half a year of talking online. I know what you're thinking, and no, he wasn't some 50-year-old sexual predator. Although I must admit, I should have been more careful, since he could have been someone interested in taking my liver. Nevertheless, we met. It was a bit awkward at first, since neither of us knew what to say. So we just kind of walked to my friend's house making small talk. I guess we were both very nervous. When we got there, things got better, and we actually had a good time although he pretty much exclusively and only spoke to me. For the next month, we kept going out on basic dates, until he officially asked me to go out steady, and we became a couple. From here, the actual creepy shit began. It hadn't been more than 3 weeks, and I was starting to feel anxious. It's a weird feeling that I used to have when I was little, and I knew I was going to be punished for either getting bad grades or doing something bad in general. It was stupid though, because I wasn't a child anymore, and I wasn't doing anything wrong. I just had this feeling whenever he was around me. What made it even more complicated was the fact that I didn't really feel he had changed. He wasn't rude or anything. He was just unsettling. He would want to see me 24/7. We never went to his house, and whenever we were at mine, he would refuse to be anywhere else but my room. He would spend hours just staring at me, and believe me, I know you could take all of this with romantic intentions, but the way he made me feel was not warm and fuzzy, but instead shivery and anxious. I must admit, I took the first chance he gave me and broke up with him. He meant to text his ex some lyrics to a breakup love song, and he texted them to me by accident. He apologized and explained that it was just to let her down for good. I had none of it. I told him we may have jumped into the relationship. Things were too soon, and that I thought it would be better if we went back to just being friends. That night, he called me no less than 37 times. The next morning I had school, and through the day, I got a text that immediately made me nervous. "What time will you be home? I'm coming to talk," he wrote. I really didn't want to see him, so I avoided talking to him. I wasn't sure and said that he shouldn't come and that he should just leave it. Plus, we'd only been dating for 4 or 5 weeks, so why make a big deal out of it? Just let it die. I did in fact get home late that night. And oh surprise, guess who was standing in the front door? He had a blank stare, and when I was passing by to park the car in the garage, he followed me with expressionless eyes. I went inside and left my stuff in my room, shaking. My brother came to me, asking what the hell was going on. I said Alan had been standing outside for over 4 hours, and I told him I would handle it, since he's my little brother, and I didn't want to worry him. I took a deep breath and went outside. We argued for around an hour, which he would tell me that he loved me, and that he knew that we were meant to be together. I told him I wasn't feeling comfortable, and I just wanted to go back to being friends. He told me to move in with him, and for a few minutes I was speechless. He used this time to explain how he would get a job and keep studying so I could finish high school and then get a job too. According to him, we would then start a business together and have our first child by the time I was 21. He had our life planned out, and I had no say in it. I managed to catch a moment to speak and tell him straight that he was out of his damn mind. I was only 17 and nowhere close to thinking about living with him, much less having a child. Alan then made this weird face, like he wanted to cry, but not actually. I swear it was like a cheap acting trick, and it just creeped me out even more. I cut him off. I told him that we were done, and I ran inside. And from here on, he got worse and worse. He would text my friends, even if they had no idea who he was. and told them to tell me that I needed to be with him, where I belonged. I blocked him from all social media since he would send me non-stop messages and post weird poems that had a hint of scary with things like, "I stand in the dark so you can't see me, but you're the light, so I always see you." He called my house. If I picked up, he would yell things over the phone, non-stop, and I would just hang up. Now, this kept happening for almost half a year, and I know what you're thinking. Why didn't we just call the police? Well, I think I failed to mention that I am from Mexico City, and I can promise you, no officer is going to take any action against a few dozen phone calls. I don't even think they'd know what to do. Little by little, the phone calls stopped, but he was still texting me, and he was dedicating songs to me in online radio stations that most people from the hardcore scene listened to. This one particular time, he dedicated "Your Betrayal" to me. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Alan became unstable, and he would go from dedicating me love poems to insulting me, saying that I was ruining his life. I honestly lost count of how many crazy and scary things he had done in these past years. But I think the worst of them all was this one time a year ago, when I went to a concert with my best friend. I was kind of flirting with one of the musicians that opened the band, and my friend was playing wingman. He went to get us some beers, and just as he stood up, I turned to chat with my friend. Then I saw two figures take the empty chairs in front of us. It was Alan and a girl who he introduced as his sister. The moment my friend and I saw them, we froze. A mix of being uncomfortable and scared got to me, and I just looked away. "You cut your hair." He broke the silence, reaching for my bangs. I instinctively pulled back. "It looks great on you. Everything does." He spoke in a soft but numb voice. I nodded and told him I was here with someone, so he should leave the chair. I looked at his sister to encourage her too, but she was absent-minded, playing with her phone. "Do you want a paper flower?" he asked, completely ignoring what I had said before. Because, as is universally known, paper flowers will solve any problem. The guy I had been flirting with was making his way back, but since he saw two other people now in his place, he just drifted away. "Dude, you seriously need to get going." I was losing my patience, but I didn't want to make a scene since the concert hadn't even started and I wasn't getting kicked out. Once again, he ignored me and started making a rose out of a napkin. "Let's go over here," my friend suggested, and I took her up on her offer. Or so I intended. Alan's sister, who suddenly lost interest in her phone, was now grabbing me by the arm tight, keeping me from walking away. Not saying a word, just grabbing me. I tried to loosen myself, but before I could, Alan took one of my hands and put the paper flower in it. Then his sister let go. Now, for what happened after this, I must say two things. I am known for being maybe a little too aggressive, but when it comes to people who I care about at any point in my life, I have a soft spot. And two, Alan has always been beyond creepy. Given that it had now been around 3 years and he wouldn't leave me alone, but he had never been violent. Both rules were broken that night. I snapped. I took the flower he gave me, and looking at him straight in the face, I slammed it against the table so that it would lose any shape it had. "You're not a good guy. You're a creeper who won't leave me alone and thinks I owe him a relationship. I said that directly to him, with anger I didn't think I'd ever felt. My friend and I pushed through and made our way outside for a smoke and to clear our heads. We were chatting, and I was shaking, and she was trying to calm me down, asking me if I was feeling better, and telling me that if I wanted to leave it was okay. Then we heard screaming. At first, it was some bottles falling and a couple screaming. So we thought someone messed up, and they were mocking them. But it didn't stop there. The yelling continued, and we saw the bouncers at the entrance rush inside. I quickly put out my cigarette and headed towards the commotion with my friend. In all honesty, I was hoping to see just another bar fight, but it was worse than that. There were 2 tables knocked over, and I didn't know how many broken beer bottles were on the floor. A bunch of personal articles from a backpack were being poured onto the floor, and the responsible one for all of this was none other than Alan. Quickly enough, one of the bouncers restrained him, as the other searched him for any potential weapons he may have had. His sister was on the other side of the small venue, and screamed at Alan and the bouncers some stuff that I couldn't really make heads or tails of. As they dragged him out, I was pushed outside by the crowd and stepped to the side, speechless, watching Alan curse and kick. I had never seen him this violent. In fact, I'd never seen him violent at all. Then he saw me. "See what you did to me?" He yelled that at me. But since a small crowd had formed around, people thought that he was just on drugs yelling nonsense. He kept yelling that I ruined his life. My eyes started to fill with tears. Maybe it was because I was scared, or because I still couldn't fully understand what was going on. What could I have possibly done to him in order to make him think this way? Thankfully, my friend found me along the crowd, and without even asking, she dragged me to the subway and back home, and I cried all the way. I haven't seen him since then, but I know he's still around. How? Well, I now live in Japan, and have been living here for about a year or so. It was my birthday a few months ago, and I got a big bouquet of roses with a card in it delivered to my door in Japan. The card with the roses read, "I shouldn't have given you paper when you deserve the real ones. Happy birthday, my love. Alan." I still don't know how he managed to track me, but it certainly made for a very creepy birthday experience. Alan, I beg you, please stop. I don't ever want to see you again. I live in a certain Midwest city that's infamously known and scrutinized for its gang violence. No matter how great of an area my side of town is, I can't help but be hopelessly paranoid due to all of the media and how it makes one bad neighborhood seem like the entire city is horribly crime-ridden. As a result, I'm always aware of my surroundings and always on the side of caution. I nanny part-time for a family through school. It's easy, good money, and I get paid in cash. On certain days of the week, I'll pick up the little girl I nanny, take her to our after-school activity, and then come home. By the time this is completed, it's a little after 6 o'clock, and being winter, it was already pretty dark then. Their house is located in a neighborhood that used to be considered the wrong side of the tracks. About 20 years ago anyway. You'd never guess now. Due to all of the high-end retailers and million-dollar houses filling the streets. It's in an interesting transitioning phase, where one block is filled with brand new mansions, and the next block over is run down and sometimes downright scary. So even though it's getting pretty affluent, you still get your fair share of riffraff and break-ins. Anyway, I've never felt unsafe or scared on their streets. It's small and not particularly well lit, but filled with families and townhouses. Their house is located at the end of a small street, and when I reach it, I see an old man standing in the driveway. He looked lost and appeared to be checking addresses. The people who live next to my family is an elderly couple from Argentina. I'd seen the man before. We call him Vovo, but really only in passing. I asked the girl I nanny if that was Vovo standing in the driveway, and she said no. He's standing in the middle of the driveway and moves to the side when he sees that I'm trying to turn in. These are all townhomes, and it's the city, so the driveways are only about a car's length off the street. I crack my window down ever so slightly. Even if he looks like an innocent old man, I'm not taking any chances. He comes up to the car and is holding up one of those large cookies you can get in a bakery at the grocery store with frosting that reads out, "Happy Birthday." He asks me where Donna is and that he has come to celebrate her birthday with her. He leans the cookie up as some sort of proof. Confused, I tell him that there is no Donna that lives here, or a Donna that lives on the street that I can recall anyway, and that he must have the wrong address. He comes closer and adamantly tells me that this is the address that he was given. I explain to him again that he must have the wrong place. Frustrated, he asks me to get out of the car and help him read the piece of paper with the address he was given. At this point, the little girl is saying, "I'm scared," from the back seat. I grew up with stranger danger, constantly drilled in my head, and I go over the same routine with her often. We have a safe word. I make sure she knows her address by heart in case she gets lost. Never to talk to anyone she doesn't know. You know, the works. My alarms are going off. Her alarms are going off. So I slowly roll up the window and back out of the driveway without saying any more to the man. He watches as I drive away and doesn't say anything further. I turn on the next block and made my way back on the street just to check if the man was still there. Sure enough, he was, but this time a few houses down. I was still feeling odd, so I kept driving, and we stopped at a local Target, just to kind of wait out for another 30 minutes. I came back and he was gone. I assumed he had either found Donna or just given up. When I pulled into the driveway, the next door neighbor was pulling into her garage at the same time. I went out and asked her if she'd seen an old man earlier, and to my surprise she did, and our stories lined up. However, this time, Donna supposedly lived at her exact address instead of ours. We spoke to the neighbors at the end of the block, and they all shared the same story. All with him wanting us to get out of the car or our house to help him find the house he was looking for. That's when I started getting chills. What I had choked up to be a senile old man was probably some sort of decoy for robberies or carjackers. He was trying to lure us out of the safety of our car or home, and there would be someone hiding that would swoop in. As the weeks and months wore on, many robberies and sexual assaults happened within the blocks of houses. One girl was walking, and someone approached her for directions. When she let her guard down, another accomplice from behind grabbed her and raped her in an alley. I hate to think, but it was probably the same team. Once I was throwing out garbage in the dumpster in the alley during the day, and I looked up to see a man by a computer next door. Not knowing who lived there, I assumed they were working on something. Later, I found out those men were actually robbing the place, and I had made direct eye contact with them. Again, not sure if it's linked, but it's terrifying to think about. I felt awful for even talking to that old man, and putting me and the girl in danger. But nowadays it's so difficult to figure out who really is genuine, and who's asking for help, and who has ulterior motives. I guess it's just sad, the reality we live in. I always get complaints that people from the city are rude and unfriendly, but it truly is a defense mechanism. I see so much shit on a daily basis that it's safer to face forwards and not make eye contact and keep conversations with people to a minimum. Again, it's a sad reality, but truly better safe than sorry. Bonus story. A friend of mine was having her 21st birthday party at her house. She's Greek, so it was a huge family thing with about 100 people, and I didn't really know anyone but her. It was a pretty normal event, so I was rocking a cocktail suit type thing. Anyway, I'd never been to her house before, and it was out in the suburbs, and I'm running properly late. By the time I get there, the birthday girl is already giving her speech in front of a big crowd in her yard. The lights are dim, so I figure I can just sneak around the back of the crowd and wait for her speech to be over. So I see that there's a concrete driveway behind the crowd and underneath a carport. I head down some steps and I'm walking behind the crowd onto the driveway, when I suddenly drop like I've missed a step. But this time I'm knee-deep in water. My momentum keeps me going forward, while my brain figures out that I've just stepped into a swimming pool, in what felt like slow motion. I plunged, suit and all, straight into the pool, and I'm underwater coming to terms with the situation I've just landed in. I thought about what was going to happen when I come up to the surface, with a crowd of 100 strangers staring at me. So, briefly contemplating, exhaling, and sinking to the bottom for eternity, I resurface through a misshaped hole in the pool, and my fears are realized when everyone is laughing hysterically at me. Turns out, the birthday girl had arranged for the pool to be covered in foam earlier. The foam had settled down, leaving a grey film over the whole pool that in the dim light looked exactly like a concrete driveway. Meanwhile, there's no goddamn pool fencing, and I ended up giving the birthday girl a soaking wet hug and splooshing around in my new wet shoes. Word got out that I'd been pushed in, so I went with that to save some face. Hey guys, it's Mort here and thank you so much for listening. Like I said at the start of the video, it would mean the world to me if you can head on over to Killer Orange Cat's channel in order to wish him a happy birthday. I'll leave a link on screen in a little bit for you guys to do that. But before you go, I'm going to announce the winner of the 6th surprise mystery box. The winner is Dark Empress. Congratulations, Dark Empress. Please be sure to send me an email in order to claim your prize. Also, make sure you don't forget to drop that like, leave